Farting is fine, but farting could lead to shitting in your pants when you don't want to. Farting is fine, but farting could lead to shitting in your pants when you don't want to. Now I don't wanna make you cry, don't wanna make you question why. For shitting in your pants now, why would I? Chili is fine, but chili can lead to shitting in your pants when you don't want to. Now I don't wanna make you cry, don't wanna make you question why. For shitting in your pants now, why would I? Shitty pants, shitting them all day. Glad to see you're just like me. Shitting in your pants when you don't want to. Farting is fine, but farting could lead to shitting in your pants when you don't want to. When you don't want to. When you don't want to. When you...
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Best Comics of the Week, and I even have a / week in review, kind of an impromptu deal, since if you were around this morning, me and Sully, our Sunday conversation ended up going kaputsies. It went right down the toilet, just like that song that started out, that great hit from the 80s, Crapping Your Pants When You Don't Want To. If you remember that song, oh my, it was such a big hit, but here we are, and if you notice that I might sound a little tired, because I am, but I just figured I'd do this. I wanted to talk a little bit and get back to doing the best of, and I think from now on, I will end up doing the best of Sunday night, probably a little earlier than I'm starting tonight. Figure it all out. Still doing the Sunday show with Sully in the morning, but I kind of like doing these things live. I kind of like doing it, the live deal, because it forces me to do it. And I can't get lazy if I end up already, setting it up for a schedule and things like that. That helps out a lot. And I'm a lazy fella. I'm a lazy fella who likes the comic book. So in that, though, if you haven't noticed, we have our DC Comics podcast up already here on YouTube. And it'll be hitting the regular feeds, all that a little later. If you were inspired, it does come up early on our Patreon, where eventually you can go and click on the link there. But it was almost 7 hours. I actually got mad by the end as I was editing it, because it was getting close. And it's the difference between, having it at 6 hours and 50 minutes. But boy, 10 more minutes, and you have that 7-hour deal where people will really lose their mind. And it's almost like if you don't get to that, then it kind of reverts back to just being a 6-hour show, which, isn't that long. Now, with that, again, we ended up doing a absolute show that was over an hour, and then we had a Patreon spotlight that was almost 2 hours. So legit, for the week, kind of did about 10 hours of DC Comics podcast, and I still am yet to edit the Marvel deal. So all of that said and done, I did start the show with the song that pointed out to what should be everybody's big book of the week, the Harley Quinn Fartacular. I know that everybody was waiting with bated breath for that one. It was such a gas, right? Oh, my. No. It stunk. It did, but we did review it on the show, and a lot of people ended up kind of questioning that. But with all the hype about it and things like that, it did end up being one of the bigger books. It was garbage. It was complete garbage. It's not going to be one of the best of books. I will assure you of that. But it was amazing that it was over 40 pages and $8 for that book. They did put it free in the app, which shows you when else, what other time is DC going to put an $8 book for free in the app? It's like, yeah, nobody's buying that scratch and sniff nonsense. When me and Sully were actually talking about the stuff this morning before we ended up being abruptly and rudely interrupted by my internet. And in that, I'll just give you a little bit behind the scenes. If you were hanging during the live chat and all that during our show this morning. My internet went out. I completely freaked out, started screaming, yelling. Nobody was in the house. It was just me and our pets. I don't think they did it. Then I really got mad because I thought my wife hadn't paid the bill. So I had to text her because I'm in Philadelphia right now. She's in Delaware. Ended up yelling. So as this is going on, I ended up kind of like, okay, I got the internet back. I went up, I did the classic. I unplugged the router, replugged it in. All right, we're good. Come down. Me and Sully are about to go again, and the internet goes out again. And I'm like, what the hell? Like twice here, this is ridiculous. Find out later that the second time it went out was actually my wife in Delaware remotely resetting the router when I had already told her it went on. So when that went off, me and Sully just decided it's not happening. And then we just ended up kind of doing our thing that we put up. We just did it without going live. Sully seemed to think it was a software that I use, which is a bit archaic, but the idea was it was the internet. And then it was my wife. I was so angry. But again, that was kind of the big thing, the Harley Quinn book. Brandon in the chat saying that the store still has 4 copies. They sold 0. Who's going to buy that? I mean, seriously, that's not one you're just going to grab off the shelf either. I don't even know. But again, a lot of people at the beginning of all this and everything that led to it with all the hype and people having videos and things like that, I just sat there kind of giggling and realized, okay, I see all these people like immediately yelling that this is a fart fetish book and the idea that it's going to teach kids to do this or that. It was just a goofy, stupid idea. It probably should have just never been a thing. If you had the, Comic Book Wednesday on an April 1st, then it might have worked slightly better. It's supposed to be a gag. It's supposed to be kind of that whole play deal, but it just didn't feel right. It's at the end of March. You're like, what the hell is this? Oh, there's scratch and sniff of poop. Oh, right. Why do I need that? Legitimately, most people know what I'm saying. You could scratch and sniff a lot of times yourself and you're going to get that. But even that, it's ridiculous. I did mention, though, this morning before we did get interrupted, that in 2014, and I can remember it like it was yesterday, I remember me and Eric reviewing all these books on our site. We hadn't actually started the podcast yet. That started in 2015. But they had a Harley Quinn Goes to San Diego Comic-Con issue. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And I actually am a fan of Harley. I know it's hard to admit recently, but I am a fan of Harley Quinn. I actually have been kind of petitioning amongst whoever will listen to me that she should go away for a while. You have to kind of put her away and make people want her to come back. Then you can come back, reset some things or whatever. But back in the day, I was reviewing all the Harley stuff. So I go to review the San Diego Comic-Con deal. And in it, Harley like stumbles down a hallway and goes into a room of Joker cosplayers. I mean, I'm telling you, probably 50 of them. And then gets gang by them. She makes sweet love to all of them. They're all worn out. And I'm like, that is a controversy. Like, that was crazy. People did have a bit to say about it. But the idea that just a scratch and sniff art book, I'm like, all right, it's what it is. And you ended up having a scratch and sniff before. It's a Harley thing. I mentioned a couple times that at one point there was scratch and sniff, and it was the Mary Jane, as the kids call it, and people were saying they got pulled over on the border of Canada. Nonsense. So that's kind of what we were talking about this morning before my internet went down. Then my wife took it down. I don't know what was happening. It was sabotage. It was. But I used to do the best of the week. I did it with my man Gray. Now, if I do it on Sunday nights, I'm not going to be able to have Gray join me. But me and Gray do a lot of stuff already. I think he's kind of worn out by me. So I think that this might end up being a solo affair. Also, just to let everybody know, I'm also planning on doing a preview show, something that I did before, live probably on Monday nights, maybe Tuesday, but I'm thinking Monday nights, so look for that. And I'll just go through some of the books that I am looking forward to. But this is, the deal where we get to be positive. We get to talk about the books that we all read and loved. And as I used to start this out by saying that these are just the books that I read and loved. And with that, I haven't read everything. And I did see Jack Halsey in the deal where he said he's only partway through the DC podcast this week, which again it's 7 hours almost, and says he has to say the Hush 2 song immediately made his best of the week. I actually played that this morning too for me and Sully before that thing got shut down. But yeah, I had a Hush 2 song, but the twist was it wasn't about the book. That was the twist. Actually, I tried to make something about the book and ended up couldn't come up with something, so I just made my own song. But this whole play, a little PSA at the beginning. Again, these are the books that I like. These are the books I read. I didn't read everything. So if you have books that you like, if you have books that maybe I didn't read, or maybe I'm just kind of like, hey, I didn't know that was good. That's why I like doing this show, not just because I like to force everyone to hear what I like. I am kind of, a self-centered prick, but the idea, and that's patent pending, but you end up where, I don't know why it's patent pending. The idea of this, I love to hear what other people are reading, get the pulse on the street there, and then maybe even, molding that into some things that we do and whatnot. So with all that, and Brandon just said the ASM is so bad, he keeps scratching and sniffing, and yeah, that's not in the best of. And in fact, I have to edit the Marvel show, and we were going to talk about a bunch of books. Ended up just talking about ASM because I was screaming for 50 minutes, and then we didn't have time for the rest. So in that, we're going to go through my books of the week. There's some surprise picks this week too. There's some big hitters that came out, some that I liked, some that I didn't. But we're going to start with the DC side of things, and I think I'll start with something that I've already reviewed here on YouTube and already said how much I did like it. I saw a lot of people liking it even more than me. It's Absolute Wonder Woman number 6. It's part 1 of 2, The Lady or the Tiger, and it's Kelly Thompson writing, art by Mattia de Luis. I'll never say it right. I look at it and it just warps my brain. But the idea of this, I said part 1 and 2 because he is doing 2 issues and then we'll be going away. And Hayden Sherman will be coming back. And there are a lot of people who are talking about the idea that they're worried about when Hayden Sherman comes back, that he might not be so welcome back because the art looks so great this issue. Though I did have some people tell me that they're used to Hayden Sherman's art. And it's kind of one of those things that you do get used to. I'll tell you, I'm not a big Riley Rossmo fan. I know there's tons out there. I know if Yule was here, Yule likes Riley Rossmo. I'm not a big fan. But when Riley Rossmo was on Harley with Stephanie Phillips, I eventually got used to it and actually didn't like it when he left. And also, I did get used to it on the Robert Venditti Sandman book. And I thought that he definitely has to have a book that suits his style, that kind of fits the deal. And if you do get that, I can kind of like anything. But yeah, I do like Mattia de Luis's art way better than old Hayden Sherman's. But I do like, and I've had like Absolute Wonder Woman. I like this. It's a little bit like, let's put the brakes on the story, but we did end the Tetracide deal. So let's take a little bit of a break to show how Diana and what weapon she had, and then set up the next phase, which is Hades seemingly having Cersei kidnapped, and she's probably going to have to do some sort of quest. But this issue actually broadens some things up in a little more subtle way of the idea that you now know that Zeus is definitely against Wonder Woman. She mentions it a couple of times. You see how Pegasus ends up being resurrected somewhat. I mean, resurrected, but still a flying skeleton. I mean, it's kind of half resurrected, but still that was something that would also piss off Zeus. A lot of things going to piss off Zeus, especially that you do end up having, Wonder Woman go off. And, the whole play of this is to try to get these weapons, and you end up going to Prometheus. And even going to Prometheus and freeing him for a little bit is going to piss off Zeus. So everything is really centered on the idea that Zeus is behind maybe the Amazons going away and also Diana being in hell, which is kind of a cool twist from a lot of times that we end up getting in a regular Wonder Woman book, where some people, everybody likes a different origin and things like that. But the idea of Zeus being her father kind of deal that we had in New 52 and stuff, not just the clay and all that. But Tom King right now, he's doing a lot of wacky things with Wonder Woman. So I like this as my Wonder Woman book. I'll take this one way more than the Tom King book. And on our podcast, we ended up having Jared on, who was losing his mind. He's part of a big contingent of people on X, Twitter, that are hashtagging that Tom King should be off the book. that he shouldn't be writing it. I might agree. I like Wonder Woman too, but this Wonder Woman and the Sovereign, that nonsense. Oh my goodness gracious. But I did like it. I did like Absolute Wonder Woman a lot. I'll move on to the next one. I got to pick. See, it's all up for grabs here. I'm going to go with something that Gray actually had me read and review on the podcast for the first time. I hadn't been reading, and it's funny because the big to-do this week is Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee, but this is Jeff Loeb and Enrique Marini on the Batman The Long Halloween, the last Halloween. It is issue 6. I did catch up to end up talking with Gray, so I read all the issues right in a row. I actually like it. I think that more people should check it out. I don't hear anybody talking about it. I haven't heard anybody say, oh my God, you got to read this. It's really good. And with Hush versus Long Halloween originals, I mean, Long Halloween to me is so much better than Hush. In fact, I just got done doing our podcast with Hush. Me and Matt on our Patreon, we went through Hush and finished today with the final issue. And they're just, it's good. And the art is really good. It's good in a different way, though. It's not a great story. The art's great, but it's also a really cool look at a lot of the rogues gallery, a lot of the, characters in the Batman universe type deal, and as they interact, but especially the rogues. But in all, by the end, the story really is, oh my God, Tommy Elliott, spoiler alert, the idea of, not really doing it. And also, it's one of those things that most people, to me, it's a weird play. You have a story that as you go through, I think everybody figured it out before Batman, which is very odd to do. But Batman, he just had that blocker where he couldn't admit that his, childhood friend, Tommy Elliott, could have possibly been the one screwing with him. Now, in this whole list, and I don't have the Hush 2 on my list. It's just a little bit below being a best of the week. I still think it could get there, but I thought that the issue itself didn't do much. It set some things up, but just as an aside for a recap type of deal, I don't think it's Tommy Elliott. I think that it has something to do big with Alfred. I think something's going on there, and we'll have to see how that ends up coming about. But that's just my guess, because usually when Batman figures out something in the first issue of things, it might not be that. It would be weird because we still have 6 more issues. I think that the real mystery is who's really involved and what's going on. But back to the last Halloween, again, I didn't really grab onto it. Me and Eric were doing the podcast at that point, and he doesn't like Elseworld stories. He doesn't like things that are continuing, whatever. So we just didn't do it. I didn't read it, but I did start reading it and read it all and read this issue, and I like it. You have a new artist each issue, and you're kind of going through, again, it's, the months of the year, you have the holidays. This one ends up having St. Patrick's Day, which has barely anything to do with it, but it is Enrico Marini's art. I'm not familiar with Enrico Marini. Even in the podcast, me and Gray were having fun saying his name because it kind of rolls off your tongue like that. But yeah, I was impressed by the art. Everybody doing a Tim Sale kind of homage, kind of tribute art, and you could kind of tell that. But in this issue, you do get some big things. You end up getting Robin getting involved with things, and it's funny too because you could tell he's so desperate to get Batman's attention. And also, thumbs up or whatever. When he gets it, he's kind of shocked. But then as things go, you end up having him actually chase down the holiday killer, actually goes after him. And in all this, Batman's still trying to figure it out. He doesn't want to tell Robin about the original deal. I think he thinks it's too dark for him. I think he doesn't want to get him scared, whatever it would be. But he keeps pushing that aside, but then Robin goes, and because of that, I think is the problem. Robin goes and chases down the holiday killer and ends up in an alleyway and gets shot, and you have a final page just like the Jason Todd deal, where Batman is holding a bleeding out Robin, though it looks like he might have got shot in the shoulder, probably passed out because he's a little kid. You can't take a shot is what it is, but you do end up having the Poison Ivy who's there and working with Catwoman. They end up having all these things. Catwoman and Batman have a little bit of sexual tension as they do. And it's good. It is good. It's not the best thing ever, but I think it's good. You have Amanda Waller show up looking all 70s Pam Grier. It was pretty cool. But yeah, I was glad that Gray had me read it, and I was enjoying it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. But we'll go to the next book. And again, I think DC had a pretty good week. And in fact, I'm sure that there's some people who will think that I left out some books, that they would probably go from DC, because the next one I'm going with is the Justice League Unlimited, number 5. Right away, I know that some people aren't reading Mark Waid. I was talking to a guy in the comments of the regular podcast this week about that. And I told him that I'm never going to tell people they can't or can or whatever. You can read whatever you want. You can avoid everything that you want. That's up to you. I rarely avoid things because of people yelling at each other or people having a fight. There are reasons where worse than that, where I will say, okay, I don't know how much I can read Sandman right now and things like that when things get really bad. But when it's just people yelling, and the whole thing with Mark Waid, I know he's a jerk. He always reveals he's a jerk. And there's the people he yells at. A lot of them are jerks. They're just jerks yelling at each other. And that I get that in this house all the time. I can't cancel my kids, or can I? But yeah, so I just go with the flow. I just read the books, and like I said, unless it's something that's really over the top, that's really hurtful, things like that, then I'll still read and review it. And actually, I haven't been liking this Justice League book. The art's great, but Mark Waid writing Dan Moore on art, yeah, I haven't really been digging it. I thought at first the team was too big. You're going with the cartoon kind of feel, but still, there was too much weird things going on. Everybody's all over the place. You can't get a focus on what's happening. And this whole idea of this villain inferno, this group, it was so ambiguous and so nothingness. I mean, I said it when we reviewed it this week. When you end up having a group, a team, and you want to have a team to go against the Justice League, especially a Justice League this big, you almost need to have a peek in and see at least a leader, somebody you can grab onto, somebody you could say, oh man, they're kick-ass, they're badass, or whatever. When it's just this random group that I can't even grab on, they're burning down the rainforest to upset Greta.
How dare you!
She's pissed off, and you end up all these things going on. I just couldn't get a grip on anything that was going on. But this issue actually gives you the grip, and finally it does, because you're heading to a crossover, quote-unquote event, more just a crossover type deal with Mark Waid's World's Finest book, Batman Superman World's Finest. Now, people were talking when that was announced, that's kind of weird. You already did have the Nezha stuff that did combine in to get us that Now Classic. See, I'm like a DC editor. You haven't been reading the Now Classic, Lazarus Reign, Lazarus Planet? Oh, I got this week they had the gall to actually say, from the Now Classic event Leviathan. That was the funniest thing I read all week. That made me laugh so much that I spit out my coffee and actually LOL'd in real life. I've never done that. But yeah, you end up in this book, though, you have the combo with the World's Finest. So how is that going to happen? Because World's Finest is in the past. Well, you kind of get how it's going to happen in this issue. You do combine a lot of things. You combine stuff from Absolute Power, because what happens is somebody has Martian Manhunter's powers that was already set up. We find out that, lo and behold, it's Grodd. Gorilla Grodd has Martian Manhunter's powers, and that's crazy because Grodd already has the mind-bending power. Now he has the shape-shifting and all that. He's OP'd. He's going crazy. But he ends up manipulating stuff. And also, what wasn't really spelled out great in the issue, but is kind of a cool play, they were going around, this Inferno was going around causing these ecological disasters, they're doing that.
How dare
like
you!
Burning the rainforest and things. That seemed to be set so that everybody goes to the G20 summit in Australia, where they end up having Grodd go, and it was this whole crazy deal, and boom, you end up having them zip everybody out. They're in another dimension with a lot of the Justice Leaguers. Well, you end up where Impulse, who's treated like complete shit in this issue, he ends up figuring some things out, but Grodd wipes his mind. But what happens by the end is we see who the big villains are. We see who Inferno are. And they've been saying, we're a blast from the past. We're going to get you. We're going to go. It is it's the Legion of Doom, and it's pretty much classic Legion of Doom. And I say classic because they're even in their old uniforms, their old outfits. You have Lex front and center in the power armor. You got Joker, Scarecrow, Black Manta, Captain Cold, Bizarro, and Sinestro. Sinestro in his old school outfit as well. And the funny thing is if you're reading this, you could right off the bat, come in and say, oh my, how is this? Lex lost his memories. And right now, from this week, he's in jail. And the Joker, that guy might be dead. And Bizarro, well, how can this go? Well, the whole play is kind of a tell with the outfits. And they even mention this earlier because I think that Mark Waid wants to make sure that you don't think that he just messed up, because a lot of books do, and it's a sad state when you have to make sure that you spell it out that you don't. But these, to me, are obviously the Legion of Doom from the past. They're the Legion of Doom, time traveling from the world's finest steel, or bouncing all around to come and do something. Probably try to take over the world. That's what they usually do. But yeah, it looks like it's time travel, timey-wimey stuff, and it'll be pretty cool with all of that. Brandon just said the Titans can plant more trees. That was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. I don't know though. You have the John Layman stuff with the Titans, and while it seems classic, there's not a lot going on there. They're yelling at each other, they're smooching, they're doing all these things. That book is a little off as well, but yeah, I like the Justice League deal, and at the end, it did get me hyped up for that event. Again, if you're not reading Mark Waid because you're making a stand, or you just don't get it on the pull list or whatever, and you want to find out what happens, secondhand, like a whisper down the lane, you can come and listen to our podcast, because we'll be doing all of those. We'll make sure that we go through those with a fine-tooth comb to let you know what happened, and you can then know the story and still have your, I guess, to me, it would be like one of those where you shouldn't even listen to somebody talk, because it's, you're then, yeah, I don't know. I don't get involved in that stuff. I'm telling you, I don't get involved in that fight. I didn't from the very beginning. I just end up reading comics and reviewing them because that's what I like to do. Even though, again, somebody in the comments, I think it was the comment for one of the older Ultimate Spider-Man books, ended up saying that the joke was on me because he enjoys the books and I just talk about what I hate. And I'm like, I don't know, this crazy joke. I wanted to know the punchline, but I just said, oh, well, I guess the joke's on me. I don't know. It's weird what people think and what people go. Even in this point this week, once again, everybody's losing their mind on the comic book roundup about Gabe, Sus Gabe and his reviews. And the funny thing is that I rarely agree with Gabe. I rarely ever agree with Gabe with anything, but he does the reviews on the site that I have. It's my Marvel and DC site. I just don't do reviews anymore. And without Gabe doing them, the sites are done. I would have just shut them down. I'm more into doing podcasts and videos now. I haven't really done a written review in a couple years, even though I still have about 3,100 of them, so I can toot my own horn here. Yeah, get done. I always have to bring that up to Gabe. But again, I don't agree with Gabe's reviews hardly ever, but that's his opinion. And these people are on Comic Roundup yelling that Gabe they should take him off the Roundup. He shouldn't be allowed to review. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, the idea that these people think that we're the good guys here, but we want censorship, and we want somebody, because he doesn't agree with us, to shut his mouth. And so I got in fights with a lot of them, trying to explain. And the whole play, when you fight with these people, it never works. Because I said, well, you can't just say, oh, he doesn't have it. If everybody had the same opinion, you wouldn't have reviews. Why would you? Would you like, oh, let's see the Metacritic for every movie that came out? Oh, that's 100. Oh, my goodness, or 0. And so I ended up saying to these guys this stuff about it. I'm like, I don't agree with Gabe either. I think that he's sus as hell, but that's him. That's what he does. But they were yelling. It was about the Martian Manhunter, absolute Martian Manhunter. And this one guy says, he can't just say that he doesn't like something because it's weird. And then I looked, that guy legit had a user review that only said, I like this because it's weird. I said, why does it go for you? Ay, ay, ay. See? That's the weekend review is who I'm arguing with on Comic Roundup. Defending somebody who I don't even agree with, and Gabe. And a Leatherhead for hire showed up and said hi. I say hi as well. But what were we talking about? I can't even remember. Justice League. It was pretty good. It's pretty good and sets up the event, has a pretty good wow moment at the end that kind of perplexes you. But if you think about it for a second, you're like, okay, I see where they're going here. That's pretty cool. But we'll move on to the next DC book that I enjoyed. And that is something that is going to be a usual suspect. It was. Again, we haven't done this show in quite some time, but we're here. And it is the Green Lantern number 21. And I know that most people are really enjoying what everything Jeremy Adams is doing. I'm a huge Jeremy Adams fan. I was so happy when he ended up getting the Green Lantern book. Thank God Mariko Tamaki bailed, and then they asked him to do it. And since then, he's elevated himself. And I think that, and he said to me personally that everybody that gets his book, everybody that talks about him in chat thinks he is so appreciative of it. He realizes that most of the deal has been word of mouth. It's been 100% word of mouth from people begging. At one point, a lot of people, including myself, begging people to read his Flash. People weren't reading it. And while, if you look at when things are announced, things get announced after the fact. Lo and behold, that Flash run, he got off the book because at that point, it wasn't selling. It was like 3-4 months before it was officially announced. Cy Spurrier would be on, but he ended up talking to me about it, and he thought he'd be out of comics. He thought it was done for him. He thought he gave it its best, and he tried. He told his, family. He's also in the animation stuff, too. It's not like this guy's going to end up a hobo riding the rails. But he really always wanted to be a comic book writer, and he thought, well, that dream didn't work out, and that sucks. It sucks when you have a dream and it doesn't work out. I know, because every dream I had never worked out, so I know how much it sucks. And he even said, I said to him, well, what about, everybody's doing that Kickstarter shit. And he said, I just don't have a name for that yet. I don't have the oomph. I don't think that would work. And he probably was right at that point. But then afterwards, the book started gaining some momentum. And I do think that DC might have been a little upset that they kicked him off a little too soon, and maybe a little upset that they had Cy Spurrier on it. Though I think that at this point, I'm guessing that maybe he's still on the book as a way to not admit that they were wrong. It's very odd. That book doesn't seem to be selling. It doesn't seem to be doing anything. I can't find anybody who even reads it. We didn't even review it. We don't review it on the site anymore because I can't find anybody who is reading it. So you end up with all that said and done. Again, I get a little distracted. The Green Lantern book this week, Brandon nailed it. It's a little bit scattered. There's a little bit too much going on. I said it in our podcast. There's a lot of pieces, and this fractured spectrum is big enough for it to be the main thing. There's a little bit of nitpicks. I like the Teen Lantern, Kelly, but they're pushing her in this weird way that doesn't really fit with what happened before. And she has her gauntlet, which that blew up. It was done. So I kind of wish something else with that. And Ellie, who I love, Jon Stewart's Construct's sister, that's not right. Things go wrong when you are a Green Lantern and you start making constructs of dead people, and they're just kind of like leaving it aside and, going with that deal. So I'm like, all right, that's weird. But the book itself and the fractured spectrum, Nate Dogg with the Sorrow Lantern, Starbreaker, all of that is cool. I really also do like Odyssey as a new character, and I think that what Jeremy Adams is doing should be maybe, we'll see how it works out, but kind of like a bit of a blueprint of the deal. She's just in it. There's nobody saying she's the greatest. I don't know why you don't have Gold Beetle there, but you end up with Khan kind of liking her, and they're talking. There's a real funny moment, and they're there kind of for comedy relief, and they end up where, unfortunately, they get the source deal taken from them by Nate, by the Sorrow Lantern Starbreaker, but then you end up having Hal come in and kind of knock some heads, or it looks like some of them might have been in real big trouble. But you almost got a bit of Odyssey's background, which I really wanted, but there was the funny moment when Superboy's like, yeah, like, I know how it is. Like, you're supposed to be doing this thing, and they expect you that, and then you look like this guy, and she's like, none of that pertains to me, but at least I know you're screwed up, so I kind of like you. So that was pretty cool, and it's cool. I wish Kyle did a little more, and Kyle kind of seems like a dummy in this, but as you go, Jeremy Adams does a good job of juggling a lot, but it's still a lot on his plate that you get when you go back to Earth and Hal and Carol are together, and they end up fighting this mind bender, or whatever the hell his name is, mind bomber. It's okay, but that's not what I'm here for. I want to see more of these, batteries. And I even thought, and I said on the podcast, one of the things that gets me is that Hal's there, and he's like, man, I'm hanging out with my lady. We're doing some lantern stuff. This is really cool. In the meantime, he just saw a guy blow up after murdering his entire village. There's a lot of those people out and about like that with the whole fractured spectrum. there's not really a lot of time to have some fun with your lady on Earth. Yeah, he wants to go and get her to go because hey, you can maybe convince Nate to do these things or whatever. But that's some big stuff going on to just have this aside. And then it leads to Hector Hammond, the DEO, Mr. Bones. I like that Mr. Bones leaves a cigar. Look at this guy's so rich. He's just leaving lit cigars all over the place. Like, he doesn't care. He don't care. He's a skeleton. Why would he care?
How dare
So
you?
all in all, though, DEO, Hector Hammond's huge for a Green Lantern book, but we already have big things. You don't really need that yet. That, to me, should have been the next arc after the Fractured Spectrum, but it's still big stuff. I mean, I'm not going to complain that there's too much craziness going on in a book because it's better than none, and it's better than a lot of the books nowadays where people are just sitting around talking and eating. You know, I get that in my regular life. That's all I do, talking and eating. But we'll go to what I think might be it's the last DC book on my list. And again, it was a surprise. It's something that I normally wouldn't have been reviewing for the podcast if Eric was still here, because it is a Black Label book, and it is Peacemaker Presents the Vigilante Eagly double feature. I had no intentions of reading this, but I ended up talking to Drew on my podcast, and he said, hey, why don't we do this? I'm like, you know what? Why not? Why not? So we ended up doing it, and I liked it. And if you had listened to some of our best ofs last year, or even some, year-end stuff or whatever, I really did like the Kyle Starks Peacemaker Tries Hard. I think that if you like the show, if you like the Peacemaker show, or even if you're like, yeah, I kind of do, but I like that humor, it was great. One of my books of the year last year from DC. It was so good. It was funny. It was over the top. I mean, some of the stuff in that book, oh my. I'm a bit of a prude. I blushed when I was reading it. This isn't as good, but it's still fun. And the big thing was that you had story consultant James Gunn. I don't think that Tim Seeley's like, what they probably did is he's like, yeah, do the vigilante that's in the show. Okay, thank you, story consultant. And then the next one is the Rex Ogle. Hey, Rexy boy, yeah, do a story about, Peacemaker and Eagly from the show. All right, thank you. Thank you very much, story consultant. Yeah, they're just trying to throw his name. I wonder if the name would do anything, because I see so many people yelling about him and stuff like that I just wonder if it's a play. But it's good. You end up having two stories in it. The Vigilante story is just basically Vigilante going around thinking that he knows what he's doing and that he's doing good, and he's just straight up murdering people. One of the funny jokes, though, is there's these two mob bosses, I wouldn't say mob bosses, two of these gangs, and they're goofy. Obviously, the one looks like the Situation from the Jersey Shore, and then the other's an old lady in a wheelchair. I don't know why that'd be funny. You're canceled if you say that. But you end up where they both have like a costume villain as a bodyguard. And the one is Saber, but he shoots guns. And the other one is Cannon, but he has swords. It's kind of funny. And then Vigilante just straight up murders everybody, but thinks that it is Peacemaker, would love it. And then actually tries to get a hold of Peacemaker because they're supposed to meet for their weekly appliance night. Peacemaker forgot, so he makes up a lie. Somehow it becomes a thing where the controller, supposedly, which he hasn't, but has captured the Peacemaker and then is using robots to attack and whatnot. But the robots are disguised as real people, so everybody you see could be a robot. This is the worst plan or lie to set up for Vigilante. He starts going around and cuts people's faces off and kills everybody because he thinks everybody's now a robot and he thinks he has to save his buddy Peacemaker. In the meantime, Peacemaker and Eagly are going to Alaska for a little time off and didn't want to upset Vigilante because he gets upset if you forget to go to appliance night. Now, in it, you do have, and there's been much ado about everything recently about books and Nazis and Cap, whatever. In this, you actually have Peacemaker fighting crocodile Nazis, including crocodile Nazi Hitler, which is hilarious. And even then, they're in a plane going to Alaska, and it deals with a lot of stuff with Peacemaker saying that Eagly is his support animal. It's pretty good. There's some feminists that get mad at Peacemaker because he talks about how much he likes breasts. See, things like that. I'm smiling as I'm talking about it right now. It's making me laugh. But it's a really good, it's really fun. I'm not going to say it's really good, but it's a good book to kind of, just tune out everything and just have a little fun if you like the show. But that's it for the DC books. I only have 2 Marvel books, and lo and behold, I don't have any indie books this week, mainly because I didn't read everything. I ended up getting caught up in doing our DC show, but I did want to do this, so I apologize that I haven't quite read everything. The two Marvel books are the ones I talked to Sully about this week because ASM was just hot garbage. Anybody, you'll never be able to convince me otherwise. I don't know who would try to convince me otherwise. The idea of Justina Ireland and Joe Kelly trying to write this awful, awful story with the 8 deaths and the idea of this crazy contest. And then by the end, and I called it, I said to everyone, one of the things that I hate, something Tom King does a lot too, but what you end up having, this issue by Joe Kelly, what you end up having him do is you put your hero, you get Peter, make him less. You make him a sad sack. I don't want to help anybody. Oh, my goodness. I think it's not worth it. It's all, I want to go write dark poetry in my bedroom with my black paint and the curtains drawn. And then at the end, when you make him say, I think that I should be a hero, that's what he should have been doing all along. I'm not going to praise anybody who ends up lowering the person to then bring them back up to status quo as if it's some sort of great feat. That should have been what he's doing all along. Peter never would have given up. I know you can tell me, oh, you saw all those deaths. Oh, my goodness, whatever. No, he wouldn't have given up because the people he loved were in danger that whole time. Finally, he gets involved because he says, oh, I'm going to use the rest of my lives. Then he dies. And everything's like, you got a life, you got a life, you got a broken neck. And then Sidorak's sitting on I think a toilet the whole time. He said he couldn't move. I just think that they didn't have toilet paper. He didn't know what to do. So you have all that nonsense going on. I didn't get it. And then at the end, you're supposed to praise the deal. And then there was a bit at the end with Joe Kelly, hey, here's a little bit of sneak peek of what you're going to get. I'm like, if that's what we're going to get, holy moly, that was bad too. I didn't even know what was going on. And they're yelling about Hondos and telling you, Joe Kelly is like the class. He does.
How do you do, fellow kids?
He seems like just a guy who's like, oh, the kids think that I'm funny. I'm going to throw all sorts of things in here. Oh, it's not good. I'm very worried. I'm very worried. And we get it in 2 weeks. I think that the idea of getting punched in the face is bad enough, but when it's continuously over and over and that quick, like you get punched in the face every month, you have the rest of the month to kind of, dig things. If it's every 2 weeks, I swear to God, you never get to rest. You're always looking behind you. You always think somebody's sneaking up on you. Ay, ay, ay. Yeah, Jason said, SU-42 to you and me, he ends up saying that Sidorak's bowels couldn't move. They couldn't. I don't know what he had. Something was binding him up really bad. Like what he should have had was chili. That does it every time. Or as what I had, and I'm telling you, I wish we did have a video. You would have seen me quite like Fatal J. I was shoving things in my mouth before I started to record because, again, this was impromptu. Then I decided to make dinner, and then what I made was curry. So right there, Sidorak, problem solved. Problem solved. I figured that if we're going to have a big deal of a fartacular, might as well go with the curry. Though it was vegetarian curry for the most part. For the most part it was. I've been having a lot of chicken curry, and I kind of just sick of that. So I ended up making curry with sweet potatoes and carrots. It's pretty good. With a little rice there, pretty good. But we'll move on to the book that I was going to talk about, that I was starting to talk about. It is the Hulk. Red Hulk is the first book from Marvel that I'll talk about, and it's Benjamin Percy, Jeff Shaw on art. I like it. Another one. It's a weird thing, and why I said at the beginning that I like to have people mention what they like in the comments or even in the live chat, because a lot of these books I've kind of have been mentioning. Gray having me do The Last Halloween. This book, The Red Hulk, Sully asked me to do it because we were going to talk about it. I wasn't planning on reading it. I really have no interest in The Red Hulk, and I'd already read a bunch of these quote-unquote tie-ins to One World Under Doom. They're hardly tie-ins. They're not tying into crap. Some of them, actually, lo and behold, have Doom in them for a little, but most of them don't. This book actually makes sense why he's not there, and I even said, as I was talking to Sully today, it is kind of a weird thing. I don't think that it means anything, because I think that they end up, hey, you do a Red Hulk book, Ben Percy. And he's like, okay, I'm not going to smile because I never do. But in the meantime, what is this event about? And what should I write? They're like, don't worry about that. do something that's kind of in its own deal, but having it being all these characters, including Red Hulk, Thunderbolt Ross, he is doing mind missions, these AI kind of the mind type things for Doom, who seems to be figuring out things. It's like a think tank of villains. Why would he be doing that if he, on the other side of things, saying, I'm on, friend, I'm a good guy now. I'm going to help the world. I'm going to do this. Well, why are you running simulations of, making the Pacific countries go at each other? Why are you doing it? It kind of could be a cool thing. I don't think it will be anything, but it's a cool escape deal. And I really like the idea. We get Deathlock, we get Riker and Machine Man, and everybody teaming up to go and escape this prison, which they find out is way bigger than they thought, which then ends up by the end where you do even have Russ, like, how many floors do you think? Because they escape, and at the end, they end up using Machine Man. He kind of blasts them up. They're all grabbing onto him and flying out as he runs out of power. And one of the fun twists is that Ross ends up saying, I got to get out of this, and maybe the sun might charge me up, because he, being the Red Hulk, he needs constant radiation. He needs constant recharging, kind of very much like Superman. But when he goes up and he's like, okay, we'll get out in the sun, and it's the middle of the night. So he's like, yeah, I'm screwed. But in the meantime, they pass a lot of levels, and they say, oh my God, like, how many levels of prison is there? Like, there must be thousands and thousands of people. You don't have a lot of characters on this team that really give a hoot about anything like that. So I think that's kind of a cool play if they do go back. And you actually have a couple characters die. You could have guessed who it was. I even said the first time we reviewed it, when issue number 1, when you go through things like this and say you're watching the Suicide Squad movie and you're like, oh, Slipknot's in here? Yeah, I think Slipknot's dying. Because you always have to have somebody die in a book like this to make the stakes higher. So you have these other guys die, but the big names, they did not, and they get out. But they're not exactly what I would call characters that would be a well-oiled machine together. I think there might be some problems, but it's cool. I really like it. And I said, I didn't think I would like it, or I didn't even think I would. I didn't even think about it. And then, lo and behold, I think it's my favorite tie-in to the One World Under Doom. At the end, you have a crazy deal where all these Doombots kind of form into this giant statue of Doom with his arms crossed, like he's at the urinal at a Yankees game. They're pretty cool. That's where I think they got that deal. I saw a guy one time, and he was doing that whole deal. And he ended up, and I'm a little kid, and I don't know why I was there with my buddy. We would go every year to Yankee Stadium for Old Timers Day with my buddy's dad, and then he would just let us run around Yankee Stadium. It was crazy. But I go into the bathroom. There's so many people. They're pissing in the sinks. It was disgusting. And I'm standing there, and I was so nervous. And then this guy next to me goes, hey, little guy. You shake it more than once, you're playing with it. And I'm like, oh, God. I ran. Piss all over me, too. Just running. I'm like, oh, my God. It was so embarrassing. But I remembered it. And I followed that advice to this day. So really what I'm saying is every time I go to the bathroom, I guess I'm playing with myself. I don't know. But I end up having some people asking it, he hasn't heard my thoughts on Red Hulk and Captain America movie. Had you had the chance to watch it? Who Dat Nation 12 ended up asking that. Probably. I think Jason right now in the chat is laughing because he knows I don't really watch a lot of movies. I have a lot of problems watching movies, so I have not seen it. I watched the trailer, and it looked kind of cool. Harrison Ford's a weird deal, and I love Harrison Ford, but I don't know. I probably will try to watch it eventually, but yeah, I have not had a chance to go. And Who Dat Nation said he did have a chance to go to the OG Yankee Stadium, but I love it anyway. Oh my God, this is back. I think we started doing it in like 81. I think it was like the strike season was the deal when we started, maybe the year before, and we went like every year until I went off to college, and that's like 10, 12 years. We would go every year. I loved it. I thought that Old Timers Day was really great. And then I'd see my buddy's dad, who was like this real, like I'm telling you, if anybody I ever met was like the John Wayne in person, it was this guy. He was like this man's man. Like he had no emotions except he was angry all the time. We would go there. He would start crying when they'd have things, and I remember like that one year, like you'd have where Joe DiMaggio died, and then the next year they'd have, oh, this guy would cry like, and I would just sit there and I'd giggle to myself, and then later on, like in the I would bring that up to shit talk him because I was especially during football season because for some reason this whole family were Redskins fans, and I'm an Eagles fan, so I used to give him a lot of shit talk there. Yeah, and Jason said I should make it a double feature with the Batman. I didn't get very far in the Batman. There was a lot of whispering, heavy breathing, and binoculars is where I left off. But again, I used to be a movie guy. I used to watch a lot of movies, but I'm more of a comics guy, and that kind of overtakes everything. And I get these weird ideas in my mind that if I end up spending time on something, then I have to podcast about it, and I don't have any time left. It's a crazy. Jason can tell you because he ends up and he does the X-Men show. People don't realize that's Jason from the X-Men show that's on the on our feed and also here on YouTube, and we use the same thing that we record on, the same software. And when you go in, it sets up a room for each person that you end up recording with. And Jason said last week that it was like so many rooms. There's more this week. There's way more. It's crazy. Yeah, it's true. So you end up, poor Joe. But yeah, so with that, back to the books. Yeah, the Red Hulk's pretty good. And if you're not reading, one of the best things about it is actually it doesn't tie that well into the One World Under Doom. I actually thought at first like that was a deterrent of things, but now I realize, no, it's not, because anybody could read it and have a good time, and there's some crazy characters in it that you wouldn't normally have on a team with, Ross and the Red Hulk thing going on. But the last book of the night and the last book from Marvel, and again, I apologize, I don't have any of the indie stuff on the show, but I will be putting our indie podcast that we did earlier this week, me and Zach. I'm going to put it up on the feed probably tomorrow. It is books that we kind of did that were from behind, but it was Bug Wars 2, which I did like, and then a book by Drew from The Aficionados. If you watch The Aficionados, an indie book that he has out with Aaron Sparrow editing that I really, really did like. So we're going to put that up tomorrow. I've been meaning to put it up every day, and I'm behind, and I have so many things that I end up having to record and edit, but we'll get to it. But my last book is another one we talked with Sully about, Godzilla versus Fantastic Four, Ryan North, John Romita Jr. on pencils, and I know a lot of people are down on John Romita Jr. Yeah, he's getting older. He's not as good as he was. I'll tell you right now, I don't think that Jim Lee's as good as he was. The art still looked great in Hush, too. It ain't no Hush art. We were going through it. That art is incredible. The art now is really, really good. But you have John Romita Jr., may have lost a step, but I think that he was into this. And maybe they had a lot of time to go. I don't know what it was. Maybe it's having a better inker. But I really liked the art in this. I thought it was really cool. And it's playing off an old schooly feel where Godzilla is attacking New York, and the Fantastic Four are going to stop him. And I think that Ryan North does a good job using the tropes of the past, not like that Al Ewing doing that Metamorpho book. And I know that Jason knows what I'm talking about because I think we're the only ones reading it. But it ends up being a pretty cool deal going forward. And I think it was a really neat idea to have this whole play because it's classic, and it's not the legendary Godzilla. It's actually, old school Godzilla, not the Godzilla Kong stuff. That's where I think the license kind of different, things like that. But it's just old school Godzilla attacking. You get King Ghidorah, who ends up being the Herald of Galactus. That's pretty cool. Then you get Silver Surfer giving up the Cosmic to Godzilla. That's pretty cool. And then you get a big hologram of Ben Grimm with Johnny Storm yelling things as if it's him talking, and that's funny. So you have a lot of things going on. And there's, this week, there's some bit of controversy between who likes the Fantastic Four book this week and who doesn't. I didn't love it. I think that the idea of Ben, becoming just Ben, he's no longer the Thing. Boy, I think that when Doom came and took away the Thing part of him, he also took his rocks, and I mean his stones, because he's just crying and going on. I don't think that was Ben to me. I think it was done just to get some heartstrings, and I didn't think it was a really good depiction of Ben. But he also says, Who Dat Nation said, "Are you not doing the aficionados anymore?" And he said, "I know you mentioned wanting to step back to let others do it before." And Wes asked me this week, and I actually would have gone on this week. I said to what happens is this makes me feel I'm like Ben Grimm. I feel like a baby, but every time I go on, all I did, and I go and look, I love looking at comments, and I know you're not supposed to, but every time I go on the show and I look at the comments, all I get are there's at least, you can go and look, there's at least 3 people every time I'm on that have to bitch and moan about this about me and that about me and whatever. And I just got sick of it. I got sick of going on a show and having a lot of fun and then looking at the comments and seeing, people. And then when I see these comments, like 5 people are favorite them, I'm like, well, then screw it. I told the one guy, I said, when I go on, it's usually because Wes needs me to go on because there's not enough people now. Because I told him, I said, I got so much going on, whatever. And this week he did kind of, really needed me to come on. The problem is because of our podcast and how I have to record with everybody, I had already set up a time. Well, 2 people. I was recording at 10 when the show begins and 12 when the show ends. So that this whole thing was pretty much taken up. And I told Wes that, but I told him I'll try to reschedule, but I couldn't. And because our podcast comes out early access on our Patreon on Saturdays, I had to do it. I had to record the stuff for it. And I felt bad. I actually had some comments in this week's show in the comments because I didn't know that Wes was going to say at the beginning, like, I feel really bad. I felt like a jerk. But yeah, it was just because I'd already scheduled some recordings, and I'll be on it again. I really do like going on it. I usually disagree with what anybody's saying on the show or in the comments, and then I feel like, man, I kind of got in, fights with this. I'm yelling at Dylan. Dylan's trying to explain things to me, all that stuff. And I love Dylan. I think he's great. And I love everybody on the show. And they're all really good guys and really nice to me no matter what anybody. I hear of everybody saying this, that, and some people even get a hold of me and ask me why I do it. I just do it because I like talking comics and whatnot. But no, it's not really anything. It was just this week I had stuff to do. So I'll probably be on at some point. I do a show each week with Wes on his Patreon. That's like a 2.5-hour comic show that we shoot the crap. But yeah, and then even that takes up a lot of time. So I end up having no time at all. But he also says, what's your front runner for favorite series so far this year? Really loving Jeremy Adams' Green Lantern run. But who isn't really? What would be my favorite? If it's DC, I don't know. I'm really liking Absolute Batman and Absolute Wonder Woman, and I'm starting to even like Absolute Superman, which was my least favorite at the beginning. And I kind of, I hope and I think, because Jeff Lemire is one of my favorite writers, I think the Absolute Flash will go up there. I do like Green Lantern, but it wouldn't be my book of the year. What is my? I don't know. I really like that first issue of New Gods. Then that kind of threw me for a loop. I know that Jason loves that Metamorpho. Who doesn't? That book. Hoo-wee. Yeah, I'd have to really think about that, about what I like. There's so many books, and they kind of come and go and zip and zap and whatever. But Green Lantern's one of them. Oh, I know. Actually, my favorite book, and I don't know why I had a blank. I actually really like Batman and Robin. I think that Batman and Robin might end up being my favorite book right now at DC, though I hear it's going to end in September. The last issue wasn't great, but I'm really enjoying that. And Who Dat Nation said the Absolute Wonder Woman art was insane this week. I hope it continues like that. I mentioned it earlier. You came in a little later. It's only for the next issue. And then you go back to Hayden Sherman. You might be able to answer the question for me, because I said I think people are going to riot when it goes back to Hayden Sherman. Unfortunately, I hate to diss a guy or whatever, but the art is so much better. This week it was so epic. It looked like, I said it in our review of it here, you can watch it on YouTube or whatever. I said it even looked like it was almost like Alex Ross art, to the point where you had Prometheus on the side of that mountain. Like, holy crap, that looks good. It looks so good. Hoo-wee. Yeah, but we're going to get back. And it's one of the things that, just to bring up, I didn't have Absolute Martian Manhunter on the list. A lot of people probably would. A lot of people loved it. I am not usually an art guy, but the art style in that was not my favorite type of art. And I think that that Martian Manhunter book, if you don't like the art, the book's done. I mean, that book is 99% art, in my opinion. So if you end up along the way, and it did get extended to 12, but if you end up having like, oh, we're going to do like 4 issues here with another artist, I think the book just falls off the face of the earth because the art is the selling point. The art is why you're there, and the art is what's driving it. I don't think that that script by Dennis Kemp did much at all. It kind of just was ambiguous. You didn't really set things up. It's intriguing enough, but it's the art that does it. It would be crazy. And boy, I love baby punting. I love it all the time. It got me so much that baby kicking that I actually thought in other books this week that there were people kicking babies. I'm telling you, there was at least 2 books that is that another baby kicking deal? Oh my goodness, it's catching on. I'm so excited. It wasn't though. It wasn't. It was. I forget what it was. Which book was it? I think it might have been. Oh, was it the Justice League? It was something where they're like carrying babies, and I swear to God, they were fighting babies in that one too. I was so excited. I was so damn excited. But that's my books of the week. Those are my books of the week. So I think I had 7 books of the week. Usually I'll have a couple indies. I usually don't get to every indie, but if there's a Ghost Machine book, some of the underdone stuff, especially Ghost Machine, I definitely would have had something there because I'm liking most of those. But with that, I'm trying to find a song to play us out. I did have a poopy song to start us out, but we won't have a poopy song to go out. Now, I'm really, really tempted to play the Batman, Absolute Batman song where there's the punning, but I don't think I'll go that route either. And I don't think I'll go dirty song. I'm trying to find this, and somehow I can't find it. I'm trying to find this song. It should be easy to find. What's going on? But please let me know what you liked this week, what everybody liked this week, because again, that gives me an idea of the pulse of the streets and maybe something that I should be not only reading, but also reviewing. And that's kind of the way that things go. And so many books, I mentioned it tonight, but in the past too, I had mentioned it a lot of times when I ended up doing the show, that a lot of the books that I ended up really, really enjoying were things that were suggested when I did this show. That whatever lies beneath the trees where nobody sees and you do things that you shouldn't when you're an animal. You know that book? One of the best books last year. I loved it. I loved it so much. And there's a sequel coming out. I never would have even known what it was. I never would have touched it. I sent her so much on the big 2 and, you know, all that sort of thing that sometimes things slip through the cracks. And I really did like that. I like any anthropomorphic thing and things like that, especially, you know, serial killing. That's my cup of tea. Ending up, actually, me and Gray do our Osagi Yojimbo podcast on the Patreon now, and I really like that as well. And I do like that whole play. You had a Mouse Guard book come out last week, all that stuff going on. Pretty cool. But that is it. I'm rambling on a lot. I have a lot to edit, a lot to do. Yeah, and Brandon says that he's going to pick up the first 2 Red Hulk books. It's good. It's just its own little story telling a prison break, and you have some pretty crazy characters. There was a guy, I think it was in the comments when we were, maybe it was when I put it out as a podcast deal from this morning talking about it. The guy said, all you have to do is say Deathlock and I'm in. And that's what's cool about books like that, where, you know, the 3 Deathlock fans, they can jump on. Deathlock. Remember that last Deathlock book? I forget who was doing. Oh, my God, it was not great. It ended up not being very good. But there you go. We talked I actually thought to myself, okay, I'm going to start at like 9:45 because this is going to be like 20 minutes. It's never 20 minutes. It's an hour. Just add this on to the amount this week, and it's crazy. I'm insane, and really I am. But besides that, thanks everybody for listening, watching, joining me here on YouTube. I'm going to do this every Sunday night. I just have to figure out a time. If you have a suggestion, I always think like 7 o'clock is good overall, but I always forget the West Coast and things like that. So maybe 8 or 9. I don't know. 9:45 seems a little late for me. I think it might be a little bit too late. But we'll see. And Who Dat Nation said he reads more DC, but ventured more into indies this year based on you and Wes's recommendations. Also have the Rippaverse books. Haven't had the chance to grab Absolute Martian Manhunter. People really like it. I'm telling you, it's a weird book. There's like, I usually say you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. But I think there's 3 groups here. There's the, man, this blew my mind, it's the greatest. And the other people are like, this is the worst thing ever. And then the group that I'm in the middle is like, what the hell did I just read? I have no idea what I just read. And woo-wee. But yeah, the indie stuff, a lot of people jumped on indie stuff mainly because the big two were kind of crapping out. They weren't doing great. Marvel is hurting. Marvel has some problems. They put out enough books. You would think that, half of them might hit, but they're not. But things can go. And again, I know there's some big hitters that people might like more than me. Say a Ultimate Spider-Man. Didn't say that. The Hush, as I said, or even Superman, Joshua Williamson. A lot of these almost made it. They were just like a little bit under. There was something that kind of, didn't quite tickle my fancy as we went through. But there's always, and people always have their own thing going on. But thanks, everybody. Thanks, as always. I hope that, you guys enjoy hanging out, talking a little comics, trying to be a little positive. I did get a little angry and started yelling about people, but still, it's kind of what it is. I like talking to people. I like doing the live stuff on YouTube mainly because you can kind of interact with people. It feels like you're actually, talking to somebody. A lot of these podcasts, it just feels like you're, and you might be just talking to the wall. Who knows? I don't mean Amanda Waller. I'd like that Amanda Waller that they had in that last Halloween. It's like the Pam Grier, as I said. I'll talk to her. But we're going to get out of here. Thanks, everybody. Look to the preview show tomorrow. I'll be doing that tomorrow night. Also, if you aren't subscribed, subscribe so you know when these things happen. I'll be doing a lot more live things. I think that's better suited for me to just come on and yip and yap than actually have them play. Because the other way, I'll never do it. I'll just end up deciding to do something else or recording 50 times because I think I messed up, whatnot. But that's it. That is it. And also, I might end up having some people join me occasionally on this one. But tomorrow I'll do the preview show, and then we'll just go from there. Also, I'll have a Marvel review show. We'll have the stuff that me and Sully talked about, but also me and Matt talking this week's ASM, and then everything else. We have a bunch of things. But please check the show notes. If you want to help us out and get a ton of shows, you can go to our Patreon, patreon.com/weirdscience. We have a ton of reading clubs. We have a Walking Dead reading club. We have a Hellboy reading club. I'm trying to think of all the ones. It always draws a blank. We just did Hush in our events podcast. We're going to move on to a Marvel thing. We have a Book of the Month podcast, all that stuff, plus a extra long spotlight each week on 2 books for the DC Comics podcast. 2 books picked in a poll by the higher levels, the badasses of the Get Fresh crew. So that is it. Thanks, everybody. And I'll talk to you all later.
Everybody talking about fart books when so much else is happening. Everyone with their dirty hooks. The hate is deafening. Maybe we need to hush and just work it